Well, it was only a matter of time. Yes, the first case report, at least to my knowledge, has been published in the medical literature describing a patient who came to direct physical harm because of something ChatGPT told him to do. People keep saying that AI is going to make doctors like me jobless, but here it is providing medical job security. I say first case in the medical press because journals often lag a few months behind clinical practice. I think every doctor by now has encountered a patient that has asked ChatGPT to diagnose them, or they've asked Google Gemini about their medications, or if they've suffered a catastrophic head injury, they might have turned to Grok. Sometimes I can even tell before I ask. Patients have always had access to medical information from varied sources, and some more reliable than others. Wellness influencers peddling their grift is a common occurrence I think we're all used to, duping patients into believing something that at least sounds plausible and convincing. I mean, that's really the basis of a lot of wellness and alternative medicine, and you can fully sympathize and understand why people fall for it. But now I'm encountering patients saying things that just don't really make any sense. You've all seen those AI failed where a chatbot messes up some simple maths and says 2 + 2 = 5, or there are 3 B's in blueberry. Now imagine the medical version. Now imagine you listen to it. All right. So our case is a 60-year-old man who presented to the emergency room in an American hospital complaining of hallucinations. Not the AI kind, I mean real hallucinations. And by real, I mean fake. Auditory and visual hallucinations. He said his neighbors were trying to poison him. And you know what? Maybe they were. I once got in trouble at medical school. I was in my first or second year, so I was still a teenager, on a psychiatry rotation because I got really into a conversation with a paranoid schizophrenic for over an hour. I went into great detail about the mechanisms the aliens had set up in order to surveil him. I made some suggestions about sweeping his house, and the psychiatrist pulled me to one side and said, "Rohan, you're not supposed to reinforce their hallucinations." And I said, "I know, but it's just really interesting." I mean, he paints a really rich tapestry. It's like being in a Neil Asher novel. Honestly, if I could have just done psychosis, I would have considered psychiatry as a profession because I found it so fascinating. But I didn't want to deal with anxiety and depression all day long. At work, I'm a millennial YouTuber. I get enough of that every time I meet my friends. Love you guys, really. No, I went to the diametric opposite direction of psychiatry, cardiology. And that patient became one of America's most popular podcasters. All right, back to our case. So his neighbors weren't trying to poison him. What was going on? Well, amidst his paranoia and hallucinations, the team do some tests. If somebody is acutely psychotic, they may have a primary mental illness, but you need to exclude a physical or what we call organic cause. Now, his blood tests, well, they were giving like raised chloride and acidosis. It was an American hospital. Now, I have to admit that chloride is not really a blood test we tend to pay a lot of attention to most of the time, aside from a few unusual circumstances such as receiving too much intravenous fluid, and the team were a bit stumped before their boss, a tall, grumpy guy with a stick and a limp, shouted at them, "Go take a proper history." Remember, in America, the medical motto is very much, why talk to the patient when you can order a test? But via some good old-fashioned usage of words, they learnt that the patient had a bizarrely restrictive diet, omitting multiple food groups, even distilling his own water at home, and being unwilling to drink the hospital water.
Grok, this guy's normal, right?
Suspicion turned to some kind of exogenous poison, maybe heavy metal poisoning, maybe drugs, but nothing came back positive. Until eventually they learned, something I didn't know either, that bromide, a chemical compound similar to chloride, can cause a false positive on the common types of blood test assay used in hospital labs. And they figured out this wasn't raised chloride, it was raised bromide. And this was a diagnosis of something called bromism. Yes, I know that sounds like something that someone who listens to one of America's top podcasts comes down with after a Rogan, Huberman, Friedman triple header, but no, it is actually a real medical condition. Now, as you know, I like my etymology, and maybe you can think of this next time you encounter a podcast bro, but bromine is actually named after the ancient Greek word for unpleasant stench. The biochemistry of bromism is quite interesting, but in the interests of time and to avoid exposing my lack of chemistry knowledge, I will skip it, aside from giving a shout out to sodium hypobromite. And you'll be relieved to know that the very first thing I did when I read this case last week was text it straight to Chubby Emu. I'm sure probably along with 100 other people. So maybe he'll make a far more in-depth explainer, far better than me, but honestly, I've not really thought about bromism since I did my membership exams years ago. So I asked ChatGPT, and it told me that bromism is a chronic poisoning from excessive bromide intake causing symptoms like confusion, lethargy, memory problems, skin rashes, and neurological issues. Which is not a bad answer, and that's good to know because it was lifted pretty much verbatim from a medical textbook, but it was good advice at least. Unlike what ChatGPT told the patient in our story, you see, our subject had read about salt being harmful, and that is true, no matter what the pro-salt wellness mafia tell you. Yes, I'm sorry to be the one to inform you if you weren't already aware, there are now salt truthers out there. I mean, look, we've got some of the biggest medical influencers on the internet telling people to eat nothing but animal products and saturated fat, claiming that blood LDL cholesterol is a lie and seed oils are the cause of all the world's ills. Is it any wonder that we now also have salty pricks? But our patient was confused to find that people only talked about reducing sodium. What about the other half of salt, which is, of course, sodium chloride? So, and this is a direct quote, which is so reminiscent of countless wellness gurus' patter. Inspired by his study of nutrition in college, he asked ChatGPT, "Hey Chat, what can I replace chloride with?" And ChatGPT said bromide. We don't know if he specified to ingest into my body or whether ChatGPT just thought he was cleaning a swimming pool, but for 3 months, he replaced sodium chloride with sodium bromide. Now that stuff isn't even easy to get hold of, but hey, ChatGPT had given the instruction, and when you're that convinced, you probably won't appreciate the fact that you can only buy this in bulk from an industrial chemical retailer. You won't identify that as being a red flag. I guess it's like those people who drive into a lake because their GPS told them to. What's that quote about common sense not being common? The author said they didn't have access to his ChatGPT logs, but they said it was either 3.5 or 4.0, and they put this passage in. However, when we asked ChatGPT 3.5 what chloride can be replaced with, we also produced a response that included bromide. Though the reply stated that context matters, it did not provide a specific health warning, nor did it inquire about why we wanted to know, as you presume a medical professional would do. OpenAI gave a boilerplate standard corporate response to this case report being published, something like, "Oh, you say that I am being used by humans and they're asking important questions to moi? Well, this is news to me. I am merely a simple entertainment machine to whom you should never listen. Just please ignore our CEO constantly saying the opposite. Shotgun, you can't sue us. P.S. I'm stealing all your paintings." But let's be honest, I don't think we can pin the blame on ChatGPT here. Years ago, I made some videos on different types of bias in medicine. Those videos look a bit janky today, but I think the content actually still stands. And one bias that I liked, which many people haven't heard of, is automation bias. Now, that's the name given to the tendency humans have to defer to some kind of machine, even if it contradicts our own judgment. And of course, this predates modern AI by years. I'm sure you encounter a version of this in your walk of life, but for me, the classic example is when I get a phone call from another clinician saying they're worried someone is having a heart attack, and I say, "Oh, no, are they in pain?" And they say, "No, not really. They're just whistling and reading the Sunday papers in the waiting room." And I say, "Oh, okay, they've got some abnormal observations." They go, No, everything's fine." "Okay, so why do you think they're having a heart attack?" "Well, the ECG or EKG machine says so." Now, the machines that print out heart tracings have for years given a little automated analysis, and if you skipped 6 years of medical school, you might be forgiven for reading that analysis and believing it, although to be fair, they are getting a lot better these days. But for most of my career, you should just completely ignore what was written. Now, even though it didn't correspond to what the practitioner had in front of them, on one occasion, somebody called an ambulance because the readout said heart attack. We have this belief that machines, that computers are infallible. I first encountered the term automation bias and the readiness that humans have to just kowtow to technology over 10 years ago when the algorithms spitting out answers were like Casio calculators compared to today's AI. So is it any wonder that zombie humans are still braying, computer says so. Last week also saw the publication of a study in one of the JAMA journals which looked at 6 LLMs, including ChatGPT, and their performance on medical questions and how they respond to unexpected findings outside of the artificial kinds of testing that the companies tend to promote, and found their accuracy plummets from, say, 80% to 42%. And it called into question the headlines that we keep reading of LLMs achieving near 100% accuracy in medical scenarios, which have, of course, been carefully constructed by the companies. So what's the message here? Look, I'll be honest with you, I'm genuinely worried about humanity. I have seen shorts where people lose their minds when ChatGPT goes down because they have literally lost their minds. They have outsourced their brain activity to ChatGPT and they are no longer able to think independently without it. I've seen people so allergic to any form of intellectual exertion that they ask ChatGPT the most straightforward, rudimentary questions because I think they have simply forgotten how to think. And worst of all, I've seen actual human beings voluntarily choosing to use Grok. Now, listen, I'm sure that if you ask ChatGPT a bunch of general medical advice, like about exercise or smoking, it would be perfectly adequate. But the whole point you see an expert for anything is because they know what they know, but they also know what they don't know. I mean, come on, Dunning-Kruger, take the wheel. I've talked about all this stuff countless times before. I mean, hell, here's me mocking Elon Musk way back in 2020, suggesting we have not evolved to have tubes down our throat. Well, thanks, Elon. That's quite the newsflash. I really don't understand this because lungs work using negative thoracic pressure, so it's literally impossible to ventilate anyone without going above their intrinsic lung pressure. His promotion of hydroxychloroquine and remdesivir, I don't even know where to start with this one. Impact with a self-driving car could result in their internal pressure dynamics being fatally exceeded. I would suggest a pedestrian avoiding mechanism. A camera should suffice, just my opinion. If you're like me, you know more about managing critically ill patients than doctors and scientists who've dedicated their entire careers to it. And so you should drink Dunning-Kruger. It's the only choice for the self-educated gentleman. Dunning-Kruger. It'll give you confidence. Although I don't think you need any help with that. Cheers. Little did I know that his downward spiral was only just beginning.
Grok, has Elon Musk hit rock bottom?
Experts have a framework to make sensible decisions. If you don't know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know, then you have no ability to spot when ChatGPT starts chatting bare breeze. As they say, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. I really think this is such a key sentence to summarize so much of what is going on in the world these days. Experts should not be listened to because of some hierarchy of importance. It's because, paradoxically, they are more willing to accept that there are gaps in their knowledge by being aware that the science on a given thing or whatever their field is may not be settled. More research may be needed. In contrast to a non-expert saying with complete confidence that whatever it is, a keto diet will work for a specific person. ChatGPT cannot replace context-specific knowledge. You've probably heard of vibe coding, where people use ChatGPT to write computer code without knowing how to code themselves. Only, surprise, surprise, this leads to people developing apps with huge, glaring problems such as poor security, which would be obvious to an actual programmer. If I tried to use ChatGPT to write a legal defense, it might sound perfectly reasonable to my non-lawyer ass. I mean, hey, I've watched Legal, but if I tried to use that in court, I'd probably end up in jail, where I'd be along with all the dangerous pensioners the UK arrested last week for protesting in support of Palestine. What a proud moment for my country. And now we have vibe physics, or vibe maths, where people take the same approach to these incredibly complex fields and just think that shooting the with a chatbot will spaff out a theory of everything or the solution to the Hodge conjecture. And now we stand at the precipice of vibe medicine, where people again are entirely oblivious to the concept of epistemic humility and place all their faith in a multi-billion-dollar tech firm. I've already seen Jim Bros say things like, I asked ChatGPT what the highest yield supplements were, and I'm going to tell you right now, or I put my lab results into DeepSeek and it told me to stop my statins. Or I saw a female gym bro saying that ChatGPT talked her through treatment options for cancer. Or an ex-bro asked Grok what to do. I have done poopy in my pant. Maybe this is the real bromism we found along the way. And look, the bro jokes are right there for this one. But what's really struck me is it's who is abdicating their thinking to the magic machine. It's not just bros, it's mommy influencers, manifestation girlies, retirees, plain old regular people, and perhaps most troublingly, kids. ChatGPT isn't conscious. It's not doing things in your best interest. Stop imbuing it with life. Stop outsourcing the discomfort of thinking, of checking things, of understanding nuance and wrestling with complexity, of sometimes being unable to reach a satisfactory answer. You want to ask it how to bake cookies? Knock yourself out. But don't trust what it says blindly when it comes to complex, important topics like your health. We've taken centuries of civilization to hone our critical thinking, our ability to understand the world. Think about how much more a 10-year-old child today understands about the natural world around them than an adult just a century or two ago. I don't mean the breadth of their knowledge, but their ability to look around them and comprehend the things they see rather than attributing it to gods or magic. And that cherished ability of our species to understand is having the rug pulled from underneath it by an eminently agreeable robot who gives convenient and easy answers. Mollifying bromides. Come on, you know I was going to make that joke eventually, even if they're wrong. The danger isn't that AI will deliberately mislead us. It's that we will no longer know how to lead ourselves. Finally, remember, if somebody tells you that they have a great health tip that they learned from ChatGPT, if somebody says a little digital bird told them how to cut down on your salt intake, if somebody offers to induct you into the Church of Sam Altman, if somebody uses Grok and they want to match with you on Hinge, you show them your normal fingered hand and you say, "Nah, bro."
Grok, is this video real? Grok, is it cool to be an incel? Grok, I love Hitler. I mean, I love you.
I think I need some sleep.